In the next section, we're going to talk about benchmarking, pilot analysis, and some of the best practices and tools that are available on both BioData Catalyst powered by 7Bridges and BioData Catalyst powered by Terra. So I'll start and then I'll pass it to Tiffany for the Terra section. Next slide, please. So when you make an account on BioData Catalyst powered by 7Bridges, a pilot fund billing group will automatically be created for you. You'll have to follow the procedure to get that funded, the procedure that Paul went over. And of course, you could fund this with the $500 or as is being recommended, $250 and apply another $250 to the Terra platform. But billing groups are very easy on 7Bridges to select. When you're making a project, you have the option to select any of the billing groups that you're a part of. In addition, you can always change it later if you do get another funding source. Next slide, please. So a great way to get started is to log on and browse through the public apps gallery, which contains over 600 CWL tools and workflows that you can use to analyze your data. Many of the tools will give you a great description of what the tool is used for, as well as some performance benchmarking. Performance benchmarking is what we call testing that's been done by our bioinformatics staff to give you an idea of how much this workflow will cost when you run it on your own data. So a lot of times you can just look it up, but we do recommend running it with an example data set in your own projects to see if it's tracking with the stated benchmarking. Next slide, please. So after you run a task, and I showed some of this at a previous community showcase, you will always have this record of your analysis. So that includes the inputs, the particular app settings you used, and the outputs. In addition, it'll always record the price at that time. And if you click on the price, you'll be able to see how much was spent on your computation nodes, how much was spent for extra attached storage. And as Tony mentioned, if you did any data transfer from one cloud platform such as AWS to Google, that would be recorded here. It's best practice to try to minimize that type of transfer. So you can see that it was $0 spent for data transfer. Next slide, please. I'm going to do a demonstration of some of this after a couple more slides. So the platform does prevent you from overspending. So if you set a cap on your billing group for a particular amount, or your funding is getting too low, the platform will not let you overspend. So if you run an analysis, it will give you a message such as this, such as you have insufficient funds. In addition, if you're doing real-time analysis in either RStudio, Jupyter Lab, or SAS, you can set a suspend time. So that computation will not be running forever, and you can actually set suspend time for 30 minutes, 60 minutes, or whatever you choose. Next slide, please. Okay, the payments page will show you all the billing groups that you belong to. And if you are at the admin level of that billing group, such as you would be for your pilot funding, you can click on the name and it'll show you your cost breakdown between your analysis usage and your storage usage. You can then go into the spending details, and I'll demonstrate this, and see for each project how much was spent for any given analysis task. Next slide, please. All right, so I'm going to share my screen and demonstrate some of these features. Okay, so here we are. I'm already logged into the platform, and a great place to get started is the public apps gallery on 7Bridges. So to get there, you go to public gallery and you click on the apps. And this will give you a collection of CWL tools, and these are always being updated and added. So currently we have 603. But of course, you can also import tools from places like DocStore, which is part of the BioData Catalyst ecosystem. So you can click on any of these workflows. It'll give you a picture of what the workflow looks like and a description. And for many of the tools, if you go down, you'll be able to see performance benchmarking, like I talked about before. So this is a RNA-seq experiment type, which is dependent on the number of reads. And that's how the cost is scaling linearly in this case. So you can get an idea for, in my experiment, I know I have 20 million reads. I know it's going to cost this amount of money if I'm using this particular AWS compute node. So once you've selected the tools you want to use, you can add them to your project and run them. And as you start running the different tools on your tasks page, you'll have a nice listing of all the different analysis that you've done. So this is a project called Community Showcase, which I made for this demonstration. And you can see the different tasks that I've run. You can see when I ran them, the app that I used, the duration, and the price. So this is a great way to use your pilot funds and to be able to start to create a budget for your project. And Tony's going to go over that later. So of course, when you click on one of the tasks, you'll get the image which I showed you before, which is all the input settings and outputs recorded for you. In addition, you can see how much was spent for analysis and storage and data egress. For the more advanced users, you can click on View Stats and Logs, which will show you some performance metrics, which include CPU usage, how many jobs were run, how many individual cloud nodes were used. So this is, if you're really going to be optimizing your workflow, this is a good page to look at. Finally, in the Community Showcase project, which I made for us, in your settings, you'll be able to change many things about the project, including the billing group. So I belong to different billing groups depending on who I'm collaborating with. And I'm currently using the trainings and demos billing group. If I click on View Billing Group, that sends me to another page which shows that Allison Leaf was the creator of this billing group, and any invoice information could be found here. It breaks the charges down to analysis charges, such as compute nodes, as well as storage charges. You can then add other collaborators to your billing group right here. So Tony's a part of this billing group. So this is the billing group that we use whenever we're doing a training or a demonstration of BioData Catalyst powered by 7 Bridges. And then if I want to see more details, I go to spending details, which I can export as Excel. And I can scroll down to the project that I'm working on and go ahead and open that up and see what if I ran any tasks or if I used any interactive analysis and exactly how much I spent on each of those. So here's one where I ran several filtering tasks, and it records when I ran it and how much each task cost. So that's all I wanted to show you for 7 Bridges. I'm going to pass it to Tiffany, who's going to walk you through some of the unique features of the Terra platform.
Thanks, Dave. All right, so I will go ahead and share my screen as well. I am responsible for helping train and educate users on BioData Catalyst powered by Terra. So I will go ahead and share my screen and get started. All right, let's zoom out of the way. Okay, so my presentation is going to cover basically what you can see in Terra to get an understanding of how much things cost when you're doing your analyses. So I'm going to kind of start off by having you all imagine you just got your credits and you're using BioData Catalyst powered by Terra. You're ready to get started, and you've just logged onto the platform. So from there, one of the things that we recommend users start with is checking out our featured workspaces. So I got to this page by going to the library and then showcase. And what this page has is it basically has workspaces that are packaged to cover a particular analysis. So for example, the GHK4 RNA germline variant calling workspace has an example data set with the workflows to do that analysis. And you can also see information about, the configuration and also how much these workflows cost. So I'm going to go ahead and click on one to show you. So from here, I actually chose the whole genome analysis pipeline workspace. So this is what the genomics platform uses at the Broad Institute for doing pre-processing germline short variant discovery and joint calling on a whole genome sample. And so with these featured workspaces, there's lots of nice information on good visuals and how much things you can expect to cost, and also how much time these workflows cost. So I'm going to break up this presentation into, how do I understand how much my workflows cost? How do I understand how much my interactive analyses will cost? And then storage for these files that come from your workflows or from your interactive analyses. And then finally, any egress that you might want to do. Maybe you want to bring some of these files, to your home cluster for storage. So let's start off with batch processing or workflows. So for workflows in the featured workspace, I can see the different workflows here. So this is the whole genome germline single sample workflow. This is the pre-processing and variant calling steps. And then I have a sample map and a joint genotyping workflow. I can see here that each of these workflows are run. I can see the entity that they were run on, and I can even go check out what they are if I go to the data tables and see, I can see them there, and I can see the size of those files. So from here in the job history, I can see how much it costs to run this one workflow. So for example, the run cost for this one workflow on this read group set was 89 cents. So this kind of going into deciding, what workflows do I want to make use of, how much can I expect that they would cost with this, size of an entity. I can kind of get that sense from here. And then I can imagine, okay, if I'm going to scale this workflow up with running it on lots of entities around the same size, perhaps, then I can, sort of estimate and forecast how much that could cost. And also it's good to also think about, what if my workflows that I run fail? A big part of running and doing bioinformatics work is that, you will have workflows that fail. So accounting for compute for anything that fails, or for files that, happen to be stored from failed jobs. So that gives you a quick sense of your batch costs. Now, when you first get started on the platform, there are some steps that you need to do to configure this to be able to show those run costs. Just wanted to mention that from the beginning. Okay, so that's your batch workflows. Now, what about, the interactive analysis compute? So from there, what I've done is I've actually made a clone of this workspace. So now I have my very own copy of it with all of the pointers to the data tables and the files that were in that featured workspace, the workflows. But one thing that's empty now is job history, because now, I can run my own jobs and have a clean view of how much things cost. So from here, I say now I want to kind of understand how much my interactive analysis is going to cost. I can go to the cloud environments, and we can already see some cost information about this. And I can go ahead and check out the different, maintained environments. Let's say I want to use RStudio, and I know that I'm going to be doing most of my work in RStudio. I can select that configuration. Maybe I have a sense of like how many CPUs or memory I need. I can see that this cost is dynamically getting updated. And say I think I'm going to need a lot more persistent disk, I can also see how that impacts the cost. So for interactive analysis, I can do some math to say, okay, well, I believe I'll be doing this sort of interactive work for a few months, multiply persistent disk by that. estimate how many hours I think I'll be actively using this machine. And then also another thing that I'm not going to show because I don't have a lot of time today, but you can also set up those auto pause features as well as what Dave mentioned in Seven Bridges, so that you can make sure that your machine's not running without you actively using it. All right, so that is compute. We covered batch workflow cost, we covered interactive analysis. Now let's go ahead and look at storage. So whenever you create a workspace, that's what I did when I cloned the featured workspace. I now have my own workspace. It comes with a Google bucket. And anytime you run your workflows, the outputs are getting sent to that Google bucket. And we provide here in the dashboard an estimated monthly cost for storage here. So say, you've done some prototyping work, you can kind of get a sense of like how much storage is going to cost for your prototype, and then forecast what that would look like if you are scaling up to a lot more samples or something like that. So I can see that information there. In terms of egress, what if I know that by the end of this project, I'm going to want to egress these files from the cloud and save them, somewhere else. Well, I can get a quick sense of how much that costs here in my data table. I can actually see, okay, for this file size, I can download it for 55 cents. And other resources that we like to tell people about are that there are Google calculators that you can use to sort of get a sense of how much it's going to cost to do any of these things that I just mentioned. So I wanted to quickly point that out here. There's also a link to this in the slide, but you can kind of put in some information here about how many gigabytes do you think your files will be, or total, how much is that going to cost to egress. But this is just for cloud storage, and you can see they have different items to pick from. So that's a quick run through of the batch workflows, interactive analysis, storage, and egress in Terra, how you can see that information. Another thing I wanted to share with you all is you can see your bill. So for example, here I went to the Google Cloud Console. I selected my Google project that gets created whenever I create my, my workspace. And I can select that particular project related to this work. And I can kind of see this nice visual of how much, storage persistent disk capacity I have. I can see my costs here for the month. So maybe another way of estimating how much your work's going to cost is by prototyping for a month and then seeing what you spent. So that is something you can make use of as well. And then another thing that I like to point out to people is that you can also create budgets and alerts. So for example, for this particular project, I can, create this monthly alerting that basically, this is right now, it says all projects, but I would pick my particular project. And then I can set the amount that I want to be notified. So we get a push notification from Google whenever I'm getting close to my budget. So say it's $100, and I can say I would like an email when 50% of my budget has been spent, or 90%. So I can get notices whenever that's happening. So that's another thing I like to share with everyone. So what I went over is also listed here on the slides if you forget or you want to take a look at it again. But that is all for me. So I'll go ahead and hand it back over to Tony, I believe.
Thank you, Tiffany. As she mentioned, we do have the slides. They'll be available on the community forum. So if you want to look closer at some of these slides, you can look at those after the event. Tony, did you want to talk about budgeting for scale just quickly?
Yeah, just for a quick minute here. So Tiffany had talked about scaling up in her presentation there on Terra. So there are 2 slides here just as examples for thinking about budgeting for scale. As you think about writing costs into a grant proposal, you need to do some calculations ahead of time. How many samples, what size are those samples, and how much is that actually going to cost? So I have two slides here, one of computation and one of storage. And so this is the RNA-seq analysis that Dave had presented using a star aligner. And so we have the benchmarking there, and you can use that benchmarking to estimate costs, right? So if a user brings 100 RNA-seq samples, they have a large scale patient sample for RNA-seq, they want to run alignment for those. We can look at the second line of the benchmarking, which is 4.5 gigabytes of paired end reads, so 2 by 4.5 gigabytes. So we can estimate if our samples are about 4 gigabytes, it's going to cost about the same, which is 60 cents. And we do some lab math here of 60 cents per run times 100 samples. It's going to cost $60 to run these on mapping. And I want to emphasize here, $60 is half the price of a box of pipette tips. I was not in the lab that long ago, and I think a case of 10 P200 tips cost us about $100 for that box. So this is about half the cost. If we go to the next slide, we have a matching calculation for storage here. So those same samples, we have 100 RNA-seq samples. They're 4 gigabytes per file times 2 for paired end reads. You want to save them on the platform for 12 months. And so that's going to be 800 gigabytes saved for 12 months. Again, basic math, this is AWS. So depending on where your data is stored, whether it's on Amazon or Google Cloud, they have different costs listed on their site. On AWS, it's 2.3 cents per gigabyte per month. So basic multiplication again, you're paying $18.40 per month. For the entire year, that's $220.80. We combine those, you're spending $280, which is 3 boxes of pipette tips. So at that, I will transfer it over. These slides will be posted if you want to review the math.